After countless requests in the comments section, today I'm going to give you my picks for my 10 favorite trilogies of all time. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean Chandler, and I started this channel because I was driving everyone around me crazy talking about movies way too much. If you can relate, you're probably in the right place. Consider clicking that subscribe button. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your 10 favorite movie trilogies of all time. As we go into this is 10 favorite trilogies, not 10 best trilogies of all time. There's nothing objective about it. It's just my 10 favorite trilogies, and I would love to see yours as well. It's based off kind of rewatchability, which ones really impacted me the most. And I'll say this, there's two legendary film trilogies that are not on my list at all. And that's cool that we have different tastes. I'm not hating on them. They're just not some of my favorites. One final thing before we get started, people ask me all the time, where do I get my posters, my Funkos, and what gear do I use for my videos? There's a link down below in the description that has a list of all of that. I updated it last night, so it is up to date. So if you've checked it before and some things were missing, it is up to date now with all the ones that I can find. With that said, let's look at some runner-ups. First up is Edgar Wright's Cornetto trilogy. This isn't necessarily a story trilogy, but it's a set of films that go together that has Edgar Wright's spin on sort of three different genres. They all have his wit, his intelligence, but they also function inside of the genres that he's kind of spoofing inside of them. So very clever, very well done. Not necessarily movies I rewatch as some of my top 10, but very cool films. Next up is going to be Sam Raimi's Evil Dead trilogy. This is such a bizarre, wacky, insane trilogy of films because the first one starts off pretty serious, except with a little bit of Sam Raimi's flavor to the mix. And by the last one, it's like full on over the top comedy with horror elements thrown into the mix. Bruce Campbell is, of course, fantastic as Ash in these films. They're so quotable, so many memorable lines, scenes, excellent stuff inside of it. And the final one here is the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy, an excellent animated family trilogy that fits together really nicely. There's not really a bad one in the mix. Great entertainment for children as well as adults. It touches on some really deep emotions. There's also a fantastic score throughout all three films. They're animated well. The characters are developed. Very cool little trilogy. And let's move into our top 10. Coming in at number 10 is the Dollars trilogy, the classic Sergio Leone spaghetti westerns. A lot of people around my age got into westerns because of John Wayne films. For me, it was the spaghetti westerns, specifically this trilogy and Clint Eastwood films. Maybe it's because I was introduced to them via Back to the Future Part 2. That's why I have such a fondness for them. But I've just always loved these movies. They started off the first one, A Fistful of Dollars, as a sort of remake of Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo, and then by the third one, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, it was just this Western epic. The score for all three films is fantastic. There's a great ambiance about them, and just the way they're directed, this is the way I like my Westerns to look, to feel, and to play out. So these are the ones that made the impact on me. At number 9 is the Toy Story Andy trilogy. This is one of the most consistent and beloved and well-reviewed film trilogies in cinematic history. The degree to which they've been able to both entertain children, teenagers, and adults is phenomenal. And the way they did that is by crafting great characters that you empathize with while being entertaining for children, but having an emotional depth to them in story arcs that parents really resonate with. As you go through the films, a lot of the themes are much more kind of about parenting, letting go, things that children can understand a little bit, but they hit parents on a deeper level, and they manage to find different angles to pursue this all throughout this Andy trilogy. And as you watch Andy grow up, you feel that, as many of you grew up watching these films right along with Andy growing up with these toys. So when you get to that kind of final send-off as Andy passes the torch, passes the toys along to the next child, you felt that. This is an incredible accomplishment and what they were able to do with these films. Next up is the John Wick trilogy. What started off as what seemed like a bit of a punchline to the joke, Keanu Reeves getting revenge over his dog dying, turned into the premier action franchise of the last 10 years. The big part of that is the fantastic action choreography inside of these films. They found a distinct way to shoot the hand-to-hand fights, the action in all of it to just make it dynamic, vibrant, to do real stunt work so you feel the punches. It's all visceral in nature. But the other piece to it that makes it work is they built an amazing mythology in the first film that they expanded upon in each of the sequels. Add to that, Keanu Reeves is made to play this type of role. He is up for the challenge. So you've got fantastic action. You've got amazing world building. You want to explore this place and all the different ways it works, and a fantastic action star in the lead. Put them all together and you have a solid action trilogy. Number 7 is the Captain America trilogy. Throughout these 3 films, we get one of the best character arcs throughout the entire MCU. In the first film, we start things off with a very scrawny Steve Rogers who loves his country and he loves his friends and he wants to serve his country with his friends. And I love the origin story inside of that film. It works on so many different levels for me. The score is fantastic. We move into the second film and his loyalty to his country is tested. He realizes that you can't trust all authorities, and likewise his loyalty to his friend is tested inside of it, which leads us into Civil War, where his friendships once again are tested, and he kind of has to grow as a person, and that altruistic, kind of naive Steve Rogers from the first film is almost abandoned by the end of the third film. But inside this, we get fantastic action. He grows. We understand why he's doing this. He's not just this cynical character. There's a reason for this development that leads him to kind of putting this shield down and abandoning it. All those things are amazing, and I didn't even touch on the fantastic airport sequence. There's so many things to love here and so many things that make me love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Coming in at number 6 is the Planet of the Apes Caesar trilogy. When they first announced Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I just rolled my eyes. I didn't think the trailers looked very good, so I totally skipped this film. There's even someone that invited me to go see it with them, and I was like, I'm gonna sit this one out. And then I rented it from Redbox, and I fell in love instantly. What the trailers didn't do a great job of selling is how good of a character Caesar was going to be, and just how much tragedy and drama is woven into the story. And this plays out through all 3 of the films, that they build true tragedies where there are villains, there are people that do bad things, but the central conflict of each of the films is built around different groups having different value sets where each of them can rightly view themselves as being in the right. People are trying to do good things and bad things happen as a consequence of it, but they weren't setting out to do something evil. In the second film, humans are trying to survive, and this group of apes are just trying to build a civilization. Because of that, there's tension between the 2 of them, and likewise, humans are about to go extinct in the third film, and apes once again are feeling like they're being hunted by the humans, and building a very real tension and drama inside of that. Caesar is one of the great protagonists of the last 10 years. He has flaws, but he has so many strengths and qualities, and it's all through a motion capture CGI character played by Andy Serkis to absolute perfection. I love these films. These are movies that just wowed me, that they were able to make blockbusters like this. So easily, this made it in my top 10. Real quick, before I give you my top 5, here's a few more runner-ups. First up is going to be the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Of course, the first 2 are classics of the superhero genre, just such a traditional take on the Spider-Man character. A lot of people still think that Spider-Man 2 is one of the top 5 best superhero movies of all time. Granted, the third one is the weakest of the bunch, but I don't think it's bad in a way that detracts from the previous 2 films. It's just the weakest and the one that I'm probably the least likely to rewatch. Speaking of trilogies with a bad third film, the Blade trilogy. Rated R superhero films from back in the 90s. We got martial arts, we got blood, we got vampires, we've got Wesley Snipes, we've even got Ryan Reynolds thrown into the mix. Now, once again, the third one is a bad film. This one, it's actually a bad film, but I think it's a very watchable bad film. It's the type of bad for me that I can still put it on quite a bit and have fun with the good aspects of it while being like, wow, this is a bad film. Third one on here is going to be the Scream trilogy. The first 3 films in their run before they took 10 years off. These were the horror films of my high school years. This is where I started to actually love horror films and appreciate them. I did it a little bit backwards. I started with the films that were kind of sending up the genre, poking out the holes in it, and then I went back and watched the films that this movie was, this trilogy was having fun with. But I think they work as scary movies. I think they're clever. The tone, the pacing, everything about them is where kind of my formative horror years came from, is from this trilogy right here. Once again, the third one is the weakest of the batch, but the first two are really quite good. Kicking off our top 5 is Star Trek 2 through 4. Inside of the Star Trek franchise, there's a trilogy of films that starts with Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which establishes where Captain Kirk is at inside of his life, how he's dealing with aging, as well as certain things that happen to Spock. And then it plays out over the next 3 films that it's kind of resolved at the end of Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. Throughout these films, you really dive in deeper into what makes them tick. You see them in a bunch of different scenarios, what their true value set is, how much they care and love for one another, the sacrifices they're willing to make for one another, all leading into the 4th film, which is actually an all-out screwball time travel comedy set in San Francisco in the 1980s. A lot of people that aren't necessarily Star Trek fans still love Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, because it is such a different take on the characters and is a comedy. But for me, this is just a fantastic little arc for these films. Some people don't like the third one as much. I'm not in that category at all. I love Star Trek 3, the search for Spock and the choices that the crew makes in pursuit of trying to rescue their friends. It all works for me. So this is a trilogy that some people don't think about as a trilogy because it is the 2nd through the 4th film. But for me, it very clearly is based off the storylines established and how they're resolved. At number 4 is the Dark Knight trilogy. Christopher Nolan's take on one of my top 2 favorite comic book characters of all time is just absolutely fantastic. It works because it is this pocket universe where he didn't have to worry about building a larger universe. He didn't have to worry about how does a grounded Batman work with a flying Superman or anything like that. He could just tell the story that he wanted to tell that was very much looking at this character of what would drive someone to do all of this. For me personally, I go back and forth as to whether I like Batman Begins or The Dark Knight more. I love origin stories, and this is such a strong version of Batman's origin story where we spend a lot of time watching him become the Dark Knight, and then you have the Dark Knight itself that kind of elaborates on all of this, gives a more complex story, a fantastic Joker from Heath Ledger. All of this leading into The Dark Knight Rises that I don't think is quite as strong as the first two. I appreciate how ambitious they were going with the scope, the size. There's a few kind of odd choices inside of the mix that I think knocks it back a little bit. But as you go into those final moments, I think it ends on a very powerful note. There's all kinds of elements throughout that film that I still think are fantastic. The score works, the performances are great, all on so many different levels. This is a powerful trilogy of films. Before I give you my top 3, remember to share your list of your 10 favorite trilogies down below in the comment section. Don't be a weirdo telling people that their list is wrong, especially not me. There's no wrong list, there's just each of our own personal favorite lists, and I would love to see yours. If you've enjoyed this video, check out this playlist up above. It's got more of my top 10 lists inside of it, my 10 favorite movies, my 10 favorite superhero movies. If you enjoyed this video, there's something in there that you'll love as well. In third place is Back to the Future, the most fun time travel series ever put to film. All of it kicking off with the original film that is just such a great premise for a film like this about a modern time high schooler, well, modern time in the year 1985, going back 30 years in the past, spending a week with their parents. That's such a great premise for a film, leading into the second one where they had even more fun with it of what if you went to the future and saw your own kids? What if the timelines got messed up? All leading into the third film where they switched things up and Doc got to take the lead and have his own romance inside of the film, and we get to spend time in a Western. They found a way to have all of the films be very familiar, very similar to each other, while doing very different things inside of them and not ever feeling like you're getting repetition in the wrong way. They obviously repeat things on purpose inside of these films, but they don't just feel like we're rehashing things because they found ways to expand the mythology. Once again, the first one is easily the best of the bunch, but the 1-2 punch of 2 and 3, I think, fit together nicely to make for a great trilogy that I love. Our runner-up is the Indiana Jones 1930s trilogy. For me, these are the 3 best adventure films of all time. If we didn't have Raiders of the Lost Ark, Last Crusade would be the best adventure film of all time. If we didn't have those first 2 films, Temple of Doom would be the best adventure film of all time. And there's no shortage of people that think that Last Crusade is better than Raiders of the Lost Ark. At the center of it, you have Harrison Ford in just the role that he was made to play as the adventurer who's both intelligent, he's handsome, and he's the guy that can kill a whole lot of Nazis. Each one of these films are roller coaster rides that start running full speed from the first scene, and they don't let up too much until the very end. They're romantic, they are globe-trotting, and they're just fantastic films with practical stunts, practical visual effects, and films that feel timeless. Because they're set in the 1930s and the way they were shot, they just feel like films outside of any specific time period. And so for me, they're some of the most rewatchable films of all time. They're some of my favorite films of all time. They're some of the best films of all time. So without question, easily, they are the runner-up here. But coming in at number 1 is the Human Centipede trilogy. Sometimes I wonder if Tom Six and myself were separated at birth because we think and want to tell stories about the exact same things. Just kidding. I've actually never seen a Human Centipede film, and fingers crossed, hopefully I never will. But coming in at number 1 has to be the original Star Wars trilogy. These 3 films were my childhood. I had the toys, I had the cassette tapes where you could listen to the story of the films, I had the books, I had all of it. And as I've grown up rewatching them. I'm now showing them to my kids. I've read the books on the behind the scenes of all 3 of the original films, and they're just special films in the place in cinematic history as they were telling of classic mythology for the modern contemporary era, and in doing so, launched one of the most popular film franchises of all time. Another reason that the films are so special is that they created a fantastic set of characters inside of them, when of course you have people like Han Solo, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia. They're people that you root for, they're strong characters, they have character arcs, they grow, they change throughout the entire films, and of course they're just cutting edge in both the technology of the special effects, what they were able to pull off in these films, as well as just the pacing of the action inside of them. If you look up at films up to their 1977, you don't find a lot of movies before these ones that move at this sort of pace and feel as exciting as these films. For me also, the final space battle in Return of the Jedi, I still think that is the greatest space battle that has ever been put on film. As the model work, I think there's just something about when you know you're seeing something real special about that. And because they did just something so phenomenal with that film, it holds up 35 years later. So of course these movies have great characters, great character arcs, powerful mythology inside of them. They were my childhood, so easily, without question, they come in at number 1. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out that playlist right over there with more of my top 10 lists. Also, if you're interested in my posters and all my fun stuff, check that out at the link down below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.